Hey guys, welcome again to another episode of Let's Be Blunt with Montel, the podcast where we get into the nitty gritty of cannabis and its benefits and its role in our daily lives. I'm your host, Montel Williams, and today we're thrilled to have a very special guest who is at the forefront of medical and holistic wellness, Mr. Michael Forbes. Michael is a pioneering compounding pharmacist and entrepreneur with a robust background in pharmaceutical sciences from UBC. He's the founder of the Forbes Group of companies, which includes pharmacies, medical centers, and cannabis-related ventures. Michael, thank you so much for being a part of the show today, and welcome to Let's Be Blunt with Montel.
Thank you very much for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely, sir. Look, I mean, you've had such a dynamic career from building pharmacies to founding multiple cannabis medical clinics and even opening Canada's first biohacking center. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started and what led you to integrate cannabis into your ventures?
That's good. Yeah, it's probably back in about 2006 or so. I was compounding for mostly mid-age patients going through either menopause or midlife changes, and they were very passionate about bioidentical hormones. And at the time, it was new to me, so I decided to go and learn and take more courses in it. And I was seeing the amount of effort that these patients were going into to fly down to the U.S., see a bioidentical compounding doctor to write the prescription, fly back to Canada, have it authorized by a Canadian doctor, and then try and get it filled at a compounding pharmacy. So I thought, well, there must be something here if these patients were going to such lengths to get this medicine. Once I started digging into seeing what was behind it, it was that natural trend that the bioidentical hormones were much more effective and safer than the conventional medicine. Flash forward about, I'd say maybe 8 or 9 years, and when cannabis was starting to take shape in 2013, I was like quite interested in, well, if bioidentical hormones, which were derived from nature, had a better effect on the body, I wonder about cannabis and other plant medicines. So that's what really got me interested into the learning. And I had an open mind saying, like, well, the science isn't there yet to really teach the practitioners in university what the benefits are because the data isn't there. And so I had to go and do my own research and learn. And so, based on, say, what cannabis is probably best for medically is anxiety, insomnia, and probably pain control. And if you look at what's the criteria to actually validate whether a pharmaceutical is working or not, you ask the patient, is your pain a 10 or an 8 or a 7? So it's a subjective measure on what your sleep quality is or your anxiety level or your pain tolerance. Well, that's the exact same way that cannabis is measured. And so, because it's a subjective measuring system, who are you to say that cannabis doesn't treat you just as well as, say, a benzodiazepine for anxiety or Zopiclone as well as cannabis does for insomnia? So, I hope that answers your question.
Sure, no, absolutely. So that's what kind of started you down the path. And I mean, let's talk a little bit about the future of cannabis, let's say in wellness. I mean, how do you see it now being integrated more into a holistic health practices, not just in Canada, but around the world?
Yeah, it's interesting what Canada did was they legalized THC at the same time as CBD in the medical community. You can't go to the College of Pharmacists or doctors and say, "Hey, we have this new CBD medicine that we really should be deploying out through all the pharmacies and doctors." Well, the colleges say, "Well, we don't have the data, so we can't get behind that." So it was fascinating how Europe went CBD first without the data, whereas Canada went THC and CBD under the medical guise only, and then actually legalized recreationally THC ahead of CBD medically. It was quite backwards, but that's the way that the colleges work. They're membership led, and so they have a duty to protect the public at all costs. And so they will wait for the data to come in, and it's still coming in. And I don't know when it will actually be deployed medically, but it really should be. You should have pharmacists being able to recommend drug interactions and recommendations of CBD to patients for sure.
Well, you know, I mean, I think that's a matter of, like you've said, it's really educating the pharmacists, educating the public, educating the masses, you know. And speaking of which, you know, I think that's really the role of the pharmacist. I mean, like yourself, you set about a mission of educating yourself. There is enough peer-reviewed, published documents worldwide now that I think anybody who's working in the medical field should be able to read and start, you know, getting themselves up to speed enough to understand the efficaciousness of cannabis. I mean, how do you think pharmacists should lead the way and lead the charge when it comes to this?
I really think that, well, the problem starts in the universities where they're getting old data and they're teaching under antiquated processes where, you know, it's really not able to be forward thinking where you can actually, you know, move ahead of some of these long-standing institutions. And so it's the entrepreneurs that have to, you know, kind of bash down the walls. And so unfortunate the way the colleges of physicians and pharmacists and nursing is run is that it's first do no harm and take a no liability stance. And so until you absolutely prove everything is fine and safe and beneficial and all the members agree, it's not going to happen. And so unfortunately we have to wait for more and more, you know, thought leaders to keep breaking down those walls. And I'm proud to be one of them.
I'm Brian. We're proud to have you as being one of them. Also, I mean, you built some incredible facilities and programs. Could you tell our listeners a little bit more about Clarity Cannabis TM and what sets that apart from, let's say, other cannabis retailers?
Yeah, so there was a lot of confusion in the market, especially along like, you know, if sativa or indica strains or, you know, indica couch. It's not true that all indica causes sedation or all sativa causes stimulation. It's based on the terpenes. And so really wanted to stand ahead of the pack and kind of clarify what types of cannabis and terpene models you can expect and what their effects are going to be. And so that's kind of where the name Clarity Cannabis came from. We wanted to kind of be more of a knowledge base and an information base for the consumers. Um, you know, and unfortunately under the regulation, like I could as a pharmacist recommend safely to patients CBD versus THC or vice versa, but none of the staff could, and the regulations wouldn't allow any retail cannabis stores to recommend anything to do with medical. It was a hard stop. You can't do it. You just have to say we're not allowed to do it, and kind of buyer beware, buy on your own knowledge. Yeah,
And
unfortunately.
then in doing that, were you able to provide the buyer or the consumer with any kind of printed materials or materials to help them let them educate themselves?
Yeah, we had large format of prints, kind of explaining like the different terpenes on each strain, and what the effects could be expected, and how the combinations would play out in your body. We could do recommendations of, you know, it's really the terpene profile that would determine whether you're sedated or stimulated or laughing or more concentrated or curious or whatever. And so we really tried to overlay like how the terpenes would affect you in the mix in your body, and that seemed to be quite well received. And we had a huge standard for quality and having all the different available cannabis products available to consumers at all times.
And you do have a broad array of products, right? Why don't you talk
Yeah,
a little bit about what they are?
yeah. Some like the market is people are doing different things in the retail space. Like some are only, you know, carrying certain strains that they pick at the corporate level, and then they're making sure that the data agreements are there so that they're really trying to funnel the patient or the consumers into their strains. Whereas we're not like that at all. We like to do what is best for the consumer, and so we typically will take in all the new hot products and really be at the front of the curve with showing our customers what's new and what's trending and what's hot and not out in the market.
Wow. And I mean, there's probably, I mean, I'm not as familiar with the Canadian model as I am with some of the U.S. model, and the U.S. model is crazy because almost every state has something different that they're doing. Um, is it kind of an open marketplace in the sense that anybody can apply to get a license to become an entrepreneur in the business there?
It's very hard. It was kind of a rush, like everybody and their dog jumped into the game. And now it's really the industry's really kind of on its knees in terms of new entrants entering the market. Um, I I might have the stats screwed up, but I think over 70% of all licensed producers are behind in their Health Canada fees and their taxes. So, there's a lot more bankruptcies and foreclosures that are coming. Each province is run slightly different. I would say that there's new regulations coming to kind of protect the industry, but it's not enough. I am optimistic that the regulators will start listening to the stakeholders in the industry and start rejigging and reformulating and trying to protect the industry, to make sure that it is a viable one and that the black market doesn't have a resurgence and then kind of wreck everything. So I think what are we, 2018, so we're year 6 or 7 into it, and stats show that by year 10 you've kind of flushed out a lot of the black market, and then new regulations can be formed, and it can become a real viable industry, kind of mirroring the liquor industry. So I
Which
am
is
optimistic, but yeah, hopeful.
it's kind of contrary to what's been happening here in the United States because I think the longer this we go regulated the way we are, the black market is thriving in the United States
Yeah,
in ways that no one ever imagined. I think it's probably 3 times the amount of the white market in
yeah.
the states. And back in 2021, legal market sold about $25 billion worth of cannabis in the United States, but the black market sold close to $75 billion worth of product. And that seems to continue to grow as the industry matures.
Yeah, it's mind numbing because when you look at the safety profile of cannabis, LSD, mushrooms, it's staggering how much safer it is than alcohol. And yet, alcohol is so prevalent, and yet, there's still this huge stigma around plant medicines, and it's mind numbing because, especially as a pharmacist, because I'm like, wow, like, can we just take a step back, swallow our egos, and just look at the stats, and then have an open mind? But it drove me crazy in Canada, and it's still driving me crazy in America. And I wish that our brothers and sisters in the South would get on with it, because our banking up here in Canada is a mess because of it. Like, we have to pay these huge fees because our banking system is somewhat tied to the U.S. So I wish that our neighbors down south would get on with it and legalize it, because it would do wonders for the general economy to provide taxes. It would provide a lot more safety and clarity for the consumer, and all that tax revenue can go in and create more jobs and more benefits for societies struggling. So it's a win-win-win across the board to just legalize it.
So, Michael, now, did you have any advice for people who are trying to get into the business in Canada? I mean, I think one of the things that I've found so interesting about the program in Canada is the fact that you guys also get to export, correct?
Yeah, that's been recent in the last year or so. We've had to get updates with our regulation. But yeah, we've been shipping over to parts of Europe and Australia as of late. Yeah, and advice for getting into the
And
industry. I mean, I would wait it out a little bit longer to see when more regulations settle and more of the foreclosures settle. Um, it's pretty saturated in Canada. And we're not seeing any real new entrants coming into the game. We're seeing more entrants close. So if you are entering, I would really be kicking tires and looking at the foreclosure market and see if you can breathe new life into that asset before starting your own new asset. That's my advice.
Wow. And how does your team seem to stay ahead or stay updated with some of the latest research and some of the latest developments?
I'm a nerd. I love reading and I love being a part of the medical community. I mean, I'm a longevity medical practitioner, and so I do attend the A4M, and I'm updated with other practitioners regularly. And just being in the industry, you're seeing what's new and what's kind of coming down the pipe. There's always new inventions and formulas and whatnot coming out there. So it is interesting. Like I do really enjoy that part of it. And I really do enjoy being able to provide another solution for patients to feel better.
Well, what role do you see like technology playing in the future of cannabis related healthcare?
I see I've been deploying robots into the licensed producer. So you have, automated pre-roll machines, labelers, packers, you know, you have as much of that automation that you can. You have new LEDs, you have track systems. You do see a lot of robotics coming in. Um, in the retail side, I have seen some kind of like locker systems where you can kind of come in like a vending machine, but I haven't deployed those yet because people still, there's so much selection out there and it still is kind of, it's just a lot to like absorb. And so it's kind of nice to just talk to your bud tender who's knowledgeable and just say, hey, what's new and what do you have that's kind of hot off the press. And so that still tends to be the number one source of information is our bud tenders. And
I
so the
mean,
retail is a
well,
little different than the LPs for sure, and the extraction centers.
how do you feel or how do you see? Have you seen any changes in the attitudes of some of those diehards who were so against cannabis now
Oh
that they
yeah,
realize that the sky didn't fall? I
yeah,
mean, what are you starting to see? Are you starting to see changes in those
yeah.
attitudes?
Yeah, you're seeing kind of the diehard municipalities that held out and didn't adopt to the federal laws. They're now jumping in and saying, "Okay, we get it," because you can see that like there's no smell in the retail stores, there's no chaos, there's no like it's just like a regular old store. Like people come and go, they're normal people. Like and so the whole stigma, I think, is really starting to die. And I'm glad to see that because you still have a huge stigma around the psychedelic industry. You have a huge stigma. Like I was in my early days, I owned methadone clinics and pharmacies, and so there was a huge stigma around that and the needle exchanges and all that. And you see that kind of subsidized off, and people are slowly starting to see that you know, drugs can be viewed as negative, or you can view the drugs as a symptom of a disease of the patient. And so I think you're seeing a bit of a change in the stigma around cannabis for sure.
And I'm sure that there's some surprising effects or outcomes that some patients that are using cannabis have been having in recent years that have challenged the common misconceptions, right?
Oh, for sure. Like the benefits far outweigh the risks. I mean, I was a huge advocate for having the law at 21 because of youth brains still need to kind of mature before you introduce cannabis. But I'm a realist, and so if you have alcohol at 19, in Canada, anyways, for the most part, it's pretty hard to have alcohol legal at 19, but cannabis not at 21. And then how are you going to deal with the black market, right? And so I think the government did make the right choice of legalizing it at 19, and that's as good as we're going to get. For my own son, I kind of you know, went through the facts of the brain development with my son and his friends. And so I was able to get them to kind of not consume cannabis until they were at least graduated high school, whereas their friends were all doing it in grade 10 and 11. And so you did see a bit of a change in them, and they all actually thanked me after. So it's kind of nice to see. But I'm a realist too, and we have to do what is going to be the reality of what's best for everyone in the country. So I get it.
Sure. I like well as a formulator and a pharmacist. I mean, what kind of advice would you give to patients who are new to the cannabis industry or new to cannabis and saying, you know what, some of them might feel overwhelmed when they go into, let's say, different
Yeah.
dispensaries and they can't navigate what's there. I mean, and
Yeah.
become overwhelmed by the options available. What kind of advice do you give the patients?
I like to really say like start with CBD first and then a lower concentration of THC. A lot of people just jump right into the edibles and they really take a too high of a dose too soon, and then they're kind of scared from it. Um, the vaporizers are very good, and you can kind of control your dose a little bit more. So, I mean, I like the more equal balanced THC and CBD concentrations at a lower dose, like say, come in at 10% THC, and start with that and start slow and just inch your way up. Like, and then once you get comfortable with it, then maybe consider some of the gummies and edibles because those can really rock patients. And then definitely separate alcohol from it because there's nothing worse than getting a green out, when you're a new user. And a lot of people are like, they'll start cannabis at like a party type setting where there's booze involved, and that's just not the way to go. Um,
Right.
right. So that's my advice. Start small and go slow.
And let's talk a little bit about the role of the community and community engagement in your cannabis ventures. I mean, how important is it to have a connection with the local municipalities?
Very, like I was very ahead of the curve. So when I saw that this was going to happen, I was emailing and sending information packages to the municipalities to get them informed that they would need to start, building some bylaws and start setting up zones where cannabis retail can be set up. So I was very ahead of the game and very information based to try and educate them. And you would have, I would say there was probably, a good three-quarters of the municipalities were understanding and kind of in favor of it. So it was only like, some of the diehards that were really like, put off by it. It was kind of ill-informed, and they were just, kind of sticking their head in the sand and not wanting to listen to any of the evidence or facts. So overall, it was most people got it. Like it wasn't too crazy at that time, and it's way more accepted now.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that now, this international perspectives of cannabis, I mean, how does that impacting your business strategies? Are you looking to expand by doing more export or
Yeah, we're
are you
we're excited. I mean, I think it was kind of a breath of fresh air for all, LP producers because the taxes are so high and the regulation is so exonerous that having a win where we could, make $3 or $4 a gram again shipping overseas was kind of like, a new wind in our sails. Now I don't expect that will go on for that long. Like you're obviously going to have, kind of like how the wine industry is. You're going to have like wine imported from France and Australia and, Colombia and wherever. But cannabis will have to a degree that. But I think right now it's particularly good because it's starting to legalize in other countries, and they don't have enough supply, and so they're leaning on Canada to really supply, which is nice.
And not only do they not have enough supply, but they don't have enough expertise
Yeah,
there. I mean, I've spoken to
yeah,
members around the world who don't understand. You were talking earlier about terpene profiles and, being able to ensure that people understand the entire breadth of the industry. A lot of people who are getting into it in Australia and other places around the world, they haven't even scratched the surface on terpenes or or flavonoids or any of those kind of things.
yeah. What caught everybody off guard in Canada, where we all had to learn quickly, was that the shelf life of a particular strain is maybe 6 months, maybe 8 months. Some are even like less, like 5 months. And so, if you were one of the big producers in the beginning that they were expecting to just grow one strain forever and ever, all men, that just didn't pan out. You had to be constantly, changing out your genetics and your terpene profiles and everything. So you really had a short shelf life on each, genetic strain that came out. And so other countries will probably think the same thing, where say, Blue Dream is going to be hot forever. Well, it's just not. It comes in and out of favor. So you've got to really change on a dime your genetics and your offerings to stay ahead of the market.
And what measures do you put in place to like ensure the quality and the safety of the products that you produce?
Well, we have a different setup where we rely on craft growers, entrepreneurs, and so we have a flow through model where the craft growers will grow and produce, and then it'll flow through the licensed producer, and so we can pivot quicker than a traditional LP because of we have the horsepower of entrepreneurs, and so they're working harder and they care more, and they're able to pivot quicker than a big corporation. So that's what kind of been good for us is being able to pivot and have new offerings all the time. And
How do you
quality
balance?
really matters. Sorry,
Sure.
quality is huge. Like craft is people want quality.
Even at that level, though, I'm thinking that education, 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 education.
Yeah,
I mean, you've got to continually stay up on educating the consumer so
yeah,
they feel more and more comfortable about consuming the product, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, our we've been handcuffed a lot with marketing because you can't market a controlled substance, kind of like alcohol. And so I wish there was more done on the government level about this. And if the medical could do, if we could educate more in a pharmacy setting with cannabis, that would be wonderful because your most accessible healthcare provider is your pharmacist. And so, but yet we don't have the ability in the Health Act to dispense cannabis. And so I really hope that that will change in the future so that the pharmacies can sell CBD, but I don't see anything on the horizon immediately. I've only heard rumors, and so one can only hope.
I mean, as you look here in the United States, I mean, we're going through a period right now where they just delayed, the decision by the DEA to go ahead and issue, a rescheduling until after the election. And I'm sure you guys have been looking at what's going on down here and down in the basement a little bit with a little attention, right?
Yeah, for sure. We all can't wait because it'll fix the banking sector and then the whole stock market. If you're in the public sector, it's just been annihilated with your valuations of where the market is, and it's just not right because you can have companies that are actually doing very well and they're producing a, a very needed consumable that is going to be here forever. And yet the stock market isn't portraying that. And a lot of it is because of the US is still legal and the banking sector can't get involved. And so you're kind of, hamstrung until all that happens. So,
But it would seem to me, I mean, one of the things that you guys do get to do that we don't get to do here in the United States is that export out model. I mean, we have, back in the last 5 years, over 200 countries have pulled out of that UN treaty from like, it was 1963, 62, 62, 63 that prohibited hemp exportation. But now that you've got countries all over the world that are
mm,
starting to legalize and starting to understand the benefits of cannabis, especially when it comes to, the fact that, there's such a savings in, pharmaceutical costs if they shift over to cannabis rather than some of the more expensive pharmaceuticals. I
mhm,
mean, it would seem like that would have benefited you guys a lot more than even benefited us here in the United States.
for sure. I mean, fear is a funny thing. Ignorance and fear is preventing common sense and the right thing from coming forward. So slowly but surely, though, that, I think the forward thinkers and the common sense is starting to prevail. I think we just have a little bit longer to go.
I mean, if you had to put that crystal ball on, what do you think the cannabis and the holistic medicine markets will look like 10 years down the road?
Oh, I think it's going to be quite different. Like, I'm quite involved in the psychedelic industry, and you're seeing amazing progress with patients with serious mental issues and PTSD. You're seeing, the opioid crisis ravaging cities and towns and countries. And we need to we've become so disconnected from nature and the healing benefits of nature that in 10 years I really think that you're going to see this new grown respect for plant medicines and natural healing, and setting is so important. Like just being in nature can heal, and I think that we've gone so far away from that there's the pendulum needs to swing back. And so in 10 years, I believe that we're going to have legalized psychedelics. Cannabis is going to be much more generally accepted. CBD is going to be CBD, CBN, CBG. You're going to see a lot more use of that. Pharmaceutical companies are welcome to come in and provide, patented delivery systems and whatnot. I do believe in the entourage effect with natural medicines. Our own receptors in our bodies have been biologically evolved over thousands of years with nature to work in harmony. The receptors work better with the bioidentical molecules than the pharmaceuticals. The death rate's lower, the tolerance is better generally. And I do think that, even in the pharmaceutical world, now with bioidentical hormones, you are seeing patented pharmaceuticals that are using bioidentical hormones because natural substances that occur in our body are meant to be there and they have less side effects and do a better job than synthetics. And so I'm a huge believer that we're on the right trend to incorporate more of nature's medicine into our daily lives.
And do you want to share any upcoming projects that you're working on or initiatives that you're excited about?
I'm working on an amendment for psilocin in my psychedelic facility. Um, I am very passionate about some of the group therapies that we're able to see and the benefits where people are in that community where they can feel safe and accepted and then share their vulnerabilities and their pains and get therapy in that in combined with plant medicine. I'm seeing like we've been legal now in Canada for I think 6 or 7 years since 2018, and cannabis is normalized now. I would say for the most part in Canada, like um, you don't like there's not really any difference that I see. Like rarely do you smell it down outside anywhere. I mean, you do, but it's not like frowned upon or like people aren't like shocked with it. I don't think that um, people are against it anymore, or you see cannabis stores all over, and they're very classy, and patients or sorry, customers are well maintained, they're well behaved. Like there just isn't. It's much less than at the liquor stores, to be honest, and the bars and that kind of thing. So I'm a huge fan of legalizing of plant medicines, and I think we got to get on with it.
Well, thanks so much, sir, for joining us today, Michael. I tell you, it's been enlightening. Your insights have been absolutely a joy to hear. I want to thank our listeners for tuning in also, and make sure you continue to tune in and hit that little subscribe button down there because it helps us go so far. And, Mike, I'd love to have you back. Anything breaks in the future, please come on back and share some more information and some of that knowledge that you have, okay?
Right on. Thanks again for having me. Great podcast. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, sir. No, thank you so much for sure. And I'm going to make sure our viewers understand. Until next time, stay safe. Love that family of yours. You do the same, Michael. And again, we'll love to have you back. And join us on the next Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments.